hello everyone. Welcome to the Legion's Diversity Panel. So this is a diverse galaxy, representation and inclusion in Star Wars. My name is Dino Ignacio. I'm the Legion's Diversity Officer. And first, I've got a bunch of intros to go through before we get into the questions and answers. So I want to just quickly talk about the 501st. The 501st Legion is an all-volunteer organization that seeks to promote interests in Star Wars through wearing and building quality costumes, to facilitate contributions to local community through charity work and volunteer work, which is amazing. On that, I want to just quickly talk about the charity that we're supporting today, which is FIRST. FIRST is an organization that helps young minds grow into STEM, which means like science and technology. And they've got an amazing robotics program that trains young kids to like really get into technology. Their mission is to inspire diverse people to participate in team-based STEM programs. So it's an amazing thing. I urge all of you to donate if you haven't already. If you've enjoyed any of the programs in the last few days, it would be great if you find a way to donate. One quick, really cool bit of information that was just fed me right now is that D. Bradley Baker, who is one of the actors in Bad Batch, the guy who plays all our clone troopers, has said that if 100 people donate $66 each, he will donate $6,600 to match it. So please help us match that donation. It would be really great. On that, let me just quickly talk about diversity and inclusion before I introduce our guests. So diversity, inclusion, and representation have always been a core tenet of Star Wars. This panel is going to be a casual discussion with some of the amazing artists that have helped shape that galaxy. You know, and just I know the word diversity, representation, and inclusion can easily be assumed to be the same things. I want to just give a little bit of a primer for people who are not familiar, right? Diversity is the act of bringing people from different backgrounds to the table. And representation is making sure they are seen. And inclusion is making sure they are heard. So all to say that diversity is a table stakes. It's where we start. It's the most awesome thing to get people at the table. But more important than that, are they seen as such, right? And that's representation. And then the next step, the most important step is, do their opinion matter? Because it's one thing having a diverse slate of people, but have they been heard is what we're working towards. And that's what this panel is all about. And so on that, I want to just lastly say the journey is not to get to 100% inclusion. There's no such thing. There's no, we've now reached it. Oh, yay, we've now reached inclusion. Inclusion is an ongoing process. And there's so many ways we can be inclusive. It's mental diversity. It's gender diversity. Wars franchise, and she has appeared in all 5 of the new Disney era Star Wars movies. We have Myrna Velasco, the high-flying Razor Torredoza, the bubbly high-flying Torredoza in Star Wars Resistance. She's voiced an amazing array of characters in animation and video games, including such as some characters in Elena of Avalor and Blizzard's Hearthstone. We have Paul Sun-Hyung Lee, who's Appa, my beloved Appa from Kim's Convenience. I love that show so much. And is also now Captain Carson Teva on The Mandalorian. He is also an active member of the 501st. I want to dig into that a little later on. We also have Corey D. Williams, who is a member of the 3D Nucleus Project and was a stunt actor from Star Wars Episode 6, where he played Klaatu. And it should be mentioned, he is the son of Lando. Right. And then on that, we open it up to some questions. So I want to just go around the room and ask you guys, tell us a little bit about your history. What was it like for you growing up? And what was your education like? Whoever wants to jump in.
I'll start. Oh my gosh.
Come on, Paul.
I had a really boring life growing up. No, it was great. I mean, growing up, I'm in Canada. I'm based in Canada right now. I grew up, actually, I was born in Korea. 3 months after I was born, my family immigrated to Canada. and we lived in London, Ontario, small city just outside of Toronto. And then we lived in Toronto, and then we moved to Calgary, Alberta, during the oil boom. And I was pretty much raised in Calgary. And I had a good childhood. I was like there weren't very many Asian kids around, especially it had a very small Korean Canadian population in Calgary. So growing up, I grew up with a lot of Italian kids. I kind of wanted to be Italian when I was little. I didn't want to be Korean because I never saw myself or my family ever shown on TV. And TV was my best friend and my babysitter, because when I was growing up, my parents, as immigrant parents, had to work all the time. So my sister and I, we were latchkey kids, and we were on our own. So the TV was my babysitter, my best friend. I learned how to speak English by watching television and movies. I saw a bunch of stuff I really shouldn't have seen at my age. And, it's no wonder that I continued on and became an actor. Although at first I didn't realize I could be an actor, because growing up, my parents always said I could be 4 things in life, right? I could be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, or a failure. So out of those choices, it was like one of those things where immigrant parents, right? Like they want you to succeed. It's like, we pulled up stakes to get you someplace. So you better make the best of your opportunities. And so growing up and watching and not seeing Asian faces on the screens as main characters, as ones driving the narrative, they're always the outsider, the other, the ones who were made fun of, or they were like dirty, or they were servants, or the bad guys. It has an effect on you growing up. And for me, the effect was my family stories didn't matter. And because I didn't want that, I wanted to be part of the narrative. I wanted to fit in, basically. And so that's why for the longest time, I denied my own heritage, my parents' heritage. And I do regret it now, because the language skills aren't there. I really, really sort of did not appreciate all that my parents did and sacrificed for me until I became a parent myself. And so, but when you're a kid, you don't realize this. When you're a kid, you're just sort of surrounded by other people, and you just want to fit in. And just like all kids do, they don't want to stand out. They want to fit in. And that was me growing up. And I didn't realize really the disparity in terms of representation until I was much older, and I was actually trying to work in the industry. And that's when a lot of things started becoming apparent to me. And that's when I started to realize other things, like, the Mickey Rooney playing Mr. That horrible character in Breakfast at Tiffany's, right? Yeah. You don't see that. Joel Grey, an Academy Award-winning actor, putting on yellowface to play a Korean character in Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins, which is like a great movie. But, you don't see these things in it until you get older, and then you kind of go, oh, okay, that was kind of dicey, right? So the whole idea of representation mattering, of diversity and inclusivity, I'm so glad that it's become something that we're far more attuned to and awake for, because I think there is strength in diversity. There is strength in inclusivity. There's strength in all this, because it can't just be one narrative all the time, because we've done that. And it's kind of boring. And there is a richness of storytellers and storytelling out there. And I'm glad that we're a part of this, and it's the leading edge of a wave. And I think instead of it being a trend, let's turn it into a movement. And here I am, and I'm doing a diversity panel on Star Wars. I never ever thought in a million years.
Isn't that amazing?
I get this opportunity. So,
Paul, does anybody ever tell you look like Arnold from Happy Days?
I get that all the time. Funny enough. Carl Weathers actually asked me when we were shooting Mandalorian. I never met him before, and he's OG like Hollywood royalty. And then Carl, we were sitting there across from lunch.
I know Carl; he's a cool guy. Yeah,
isn't he amazing? But I'd never met him, and I thought, he's going to be the directing the episode. I'm going to sit down and chat with him about it, because we're going to be working together. And I went up to him, and he was sitting alone at the lunch table, and I said, "Do you mind if I sit down?" And he looks at me. And he does the coolest thing. He kicks the chair out so that I can sit down on it, right? I'm like, all right. And I'm about to sit down, and he says, "Just as long as you don't expect a conversation." And I kind of half stop. I'm like, oh, I've committed. I'm going to just sit there. I'm just going to eat my food. I'm not going to be weird about it. I'm just going to eat my food and leave. But he was looking at me, and he said, where are you from? So I from Canada. It's another country. And he looks at me, and he's very thoughtful. He's a very thoughtful, and his gaze is penetrating. And he said, "You remind me of a friend of mine. Do you know Pat Morita?" Yeah. And that was just like, for me, it was like, oh my God, that's because I adored, like, he was talking about one of the positive sort of Asian role models.
Yeah.
Me growing up, right?
Yeah.
So anytime anybody says that, I take
He
that
was
as
beloved. I mean,
Awesome.
Right.
everyone loved him.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll take that. I'll take that 80 place on Sundays.
Myrna, how about yourself? How was your youth, and how did you what's your history?
Well, my youth was okay. So I grew up here in LA. Thank you, Paul, for such an entertaining bio. I'm like, wait, we're not done here, So where did I grow up? I grew up in LA. I am Mexican American. My parents are also immigrants. They immigrated from Mexico, though it's kind of this funny thing where like I'm a history snob. So my family has generationally been in California for hundreds of years. And I take this as a personal affront that there was a time period in America where Mexicans were shipped back to Mexico, or Latin Americans who didn't have to be from Mexico were shipped to Mexico because we just looked or sounded Mexican. So that kind of happened to my family for a while, and I have a big chip on my shoulder about it, which I guess makes good for animated racers. But I grew up in Santa Clarita because I think this is a generational chip, if you will. My dad moved to California specifically because he wanted his children to be Californian. I was like, I don't know what that means, but okay. What I understood it to mean growing up was that like he wanted us to be suburban American. And so I sound like this, which is just, was a really hard place to put me because I grew up always wanting to be an actor as well. Like, we were talking earlier that like I wanted to be an archaeologist, like Indiana Jones. I wanted to be a veterinarian that can speak to animals. I wanted to be a magical witch, and like you can't. You're 15 years old, Myrna. You have to make a decision. Magical witch. But then I ran into theater, and because I grew up in a really suburban area, that was like the thing to do because I didn't have a ton of great role models in television as a Mexican American, and my family was very attuned. My mother specifically was very attuned to the idea that like her kids could be taken down a wrong path very easily just because even their teachers perceive them to be a certain way. We could be cholos. We could be, just bad influences on the other kids kind of thing. And it was like, that's not true at all. I love Hello Kitty and My Little Pony. What are you talking about? So I was very sensitive, and my mom was like, well, you should do theater so that you don't end up in a gang. And it turns out it worked out really well. And that I am a weird ham. But I didn't have a ton of really positive Mexican role models. So a lot of my role models were British people because that, made me feel assimilated, and I wanted to go to college for theater, which on a gardener's salary, my dad was like, rethink the idea, my love. So I didn't. And I was lucky and just kind of diluted enough to be like, I live in LA. You're not going to make me pay rent for a while, right, Mom? And she was like, just go to school somewhere and we'll call it even. So I took a bunch of classes and a lot of private tutoring here in LA after not getting into all of the top schools in New York, because that's what happens. Just kind of found my people in voiceover, and found people that thought my unusual talents for mimicry and mockery are useful for voiceover.
That's awesome.
That's why I'm here.
Thank you for sharing that. How about you, Samantha? Talk to us a little bit about how you got here and a little bit of your history.
Hi, so I was born in London. My family originated from Barbados. So my mum was an immigrant. She moved here at a very young age from Barbados to London, which was incredibly difficult and horrible for her at the time. My grandmother had come over before that, which was often the way with immigrants from the West Indies to the UK. They would come over and get a job, build a life, and then bring their family over bit by bit. I'm sure that's the same for many immigrants all over the world. We can trace our ancestors. Well, the generations that were in Barbados were primarily slaves in the slave trade, and were taken, I discovered through DNA testing, from West Africa. So we've been on a bit of a journey from West Africa to Barbados and then here to the UK. So my mum is Black, my dad's Greek, so I have a very unique look. But being brought up by my mum as a single parent, predominantly Black culture, Black food, Black music, my whole, I identify as Black, which doesn't necessarily match how I look outwardly, which has been difficult at times, especially amongst certain people when they don't realise what they're saying in front of me, when they assume that I'm something that I'm not. So I've heard some not very nice things be said in front of me. But yeah, I've been here. I moved from London to study acting, just up north of London, and yeah, basically that's it. That's me.
I love your accent. This is such a beautiful panel of people here. I mean, this is such great. I mean, this is really great. I mean, and I'm so happy that you invited me to be a part of this. And, it's just such a cool thing. Everybody bringing their own perspectives to this whole situation. This discussion is really super cool. It's a special thing.
It is. I'm super. I'm very nervous, but I'm super proud of what we've got going on here. I think it's really important. I think this is a watershed moment.
Yeah. On that, Corey, I would love to hear. I know so much about you already, but I want everybody else to know more about you. If you could share a little bit about your background, that would be great.
Well, I guess I could talk about things that people might not know about, which is, there was West Indian immigrants in my family as well. My great-grandparents were both West Indian immigrants on my grandmother's side of the family, my father's mother. My mother is biracial, so she had her mother was Caucasian and her father's Black. So, I come from a hugely diverse family. I mean, we're all just, my grandfather, whose name was December Williams, which is where the D in my name comes from, my father's name. My father's name is actually William December Williams, which, some people may or may not know. But so I always say that I'm the original D because on my birth certificate, it says Corey D. Williams, and I'm the only one in my family that actually has that name on their birth certificate.
Can I just interrupt you real quickly? On episode 9, I worked with your dad on episode 9, which was a huge honor. But a bunch of my friends were part of your dad's group of pilots, and they were known as the December pilots. And none of them were. And that's so nice. That was a tribute to your dad and to your grandfather. Well, I had no clue that was for that reason. So that's so nice to hear that story. It makes sense now.
I was like that close to being there with you guys. It just didn't work out. Timing wise and scheduling and all that just didn't work out. But I was really close to joining the family once again. But yeah, I mean, my father married a Japanese woman. So, his wife right now is Japanese. And so I was exposed to that culture. So I was exposed to a lot of cultures growing up. I'm originally from New York City, from Manhattan, from Harlem. So, I grew up in a predominantly Black neighborhood. But the thing was, my parents didn't have a lot of money. My dad was a hardworking actor trying to make it in the business, in the industry. So he wasn't famous when I was growing up. He was just a guy, and I remember going to the park and doing, when my dad would do plays in the park, and I would go with him. We would all ride in a VW van, and then they would do these plays, set up a stage and do these plays, and then things would happen. And then he went from that to Broadway, and then other things happened later in his career, like Brian's song. I was, probably 12 or so years old when he started to his career started to pick up. So I was exposed to a lot of different things, a lot of different levels in my life. I consider an advantage to me because I know what everything is like pretty much. But my parents sent me to a private school because the schools in my neighborhood, you learn how to run or you learn how to fight, but they sent me to Greenwich Village, actually, to a really cool school called Downtown Community School. It was very diverse culturally. All kinds of kids went there. So it was a wonderful experience growing up. I hardly ever saw myself as being that different. I just thought that, I never looked at anybody any differently. So it was like I didn't start experiencing that kind of stuff until later. And I got much older, but when we were kids, everybody was just cool. We were just, barely noticed the difference between each other. We just, everybody, and like I said, my family is so culturally diverse that, everybody was always accepted, included. My grandmother's brother was gay, and he was a fantastic vocal coach and pianist, and my grandmother sang opera, so she exposed me to that kind of music. And then, I would sneak into James Brown records, and she would, find a way to sort of like put them somewhere where they would get melted, and then I'd buy another copy, I wanted to be Jimi Hendrix at one point. So she bought me a guitar out of a catalog, and then I learned to play guitar, but I got discouraged really quickly when I found that I couldn't be Jimi Hendrix overnight. Right? I thought, I'll get a guitar, I'll pick it up, and I'll be Jimi Hendrix. No, it doesn't work that way. You might look like him, but you're not him. So it was unfortunate in a lot of ways. My father opened doors for a lot of people that followed him. I don't know that he always gets the credit for how many doors he really actually opened, but I think part of who he is he never saw himself as, and he will tell you, he never saw himself as being a Black actor. He just saw himself as being an actor. And so a lot of the roles that he portrayed could have been portrayed by anyone, but the characters happen to be Black.
That's a great jumping off point. Thank you. Thank you for all the intros. I want to take us to the heart of this conversation, which is that we are now at that stage where Star Wars has opened up and created opportunities for more diversity in all types of it. And we see it now in the characters and in the relationships that they have and the mental states that they carry. Talk a little bit to the audience and myself about like what that means, like all this representation that we're starting to see in Star Wars. Again, thanks to like Billy D being one of the first of diversity in the series, and then what has that meant to you and the role that you portray, and that not to put pressure, but that burden you carry as now the people that carry that torch for the next generation.
Well, my father would he often said, Lando Calrissian is like an Armenian name, he could have been anyone. But, I'm sure it was, they knew what they were doing putting him in the films. I mean, he definitely had a solid audience, and definitely an African-American following, a Black following, that he could bring to the genre that may have been missing previously. I mean, I always loved I loved the first Star Wars movie. I was a Star Wars geek from the start. So, and, everybody was an alien in that film. So nobody, there was almost nobody to really like identify with or not identify with. I mean, it was just somewhere else, another universe far, far away from another galaxy, So yeah, I mean, it was, and I was really excited when he told me that he was going to be in it. I didn't believe him really at first. I was like, what? They're doing what? They're putting you in something like, how are they going to fit you? Because he had been doing these romantic roles and different things like that. I'm like going, how is that going to work in a Star Wars movie? And, you know, the character of Lando Calrissian is so much, there's so much of him in that character. Like, you know, it's hard for me to watch it and separate him from the character sometimes. It's sort of an exaggerated version of who he really is, you know? So, you know, and I think they actually wrote it that way. I mean, it wasn't like they had this character and they wanted to cast somebody and they picked him. They wrote him into that movie, basically.
I mean, that's kind of like the beauty of those scripts, though, right? That you don't. I love Star Wars too because, like, you don't. Everybody's an alien. Like, what do you mean I can't play Han Solo? You don't know what his alien life form. You don't know what that's about. Like, I'm the alien Han Solo, and that was how I kind of grew up with Star Wars. Is like this non-specific world where you get to decide, because like in my family there were like I still have 9 million cousins, and everybody wanted to play our Star Wars pretend game at grandma's house. Like, that's what we did. We all showed up, we ate frijoles, and we then went outside and played Star Wars. Like, that's who we are. And you know, as well as with like friends and neighborhood kids. But yeah, like there was only Leia, but like if you've got 10 kids, 6 of them are girls, that's not how it's going to work here, guys. So it was a free for all, and like it's beautiful that, like, to hear that the scripts let your father be who he is as Lando, and that Lando is him, and it's interchangeable, because it's like, yeah, because we could all do that, and that's kind of the beauty of Star Wars, is that like anybody can interject themselves and be themselves within this universe, and because it's a galaxy far, far away. So like, why not bring your own culture to it? Why not bring your own swagger to it? Why not? It just gives me a space to be myself. And there's a lot of, like, just to my character Toradoza, you mentioned, Dino, like she's bubbly, and I'm like super awkward and bubbly. But it's the realization that like a fighter pilot can also be kind of chipper and weird, and that is that the personality is not indicative of whether or not a job will be done well or not. And to not underestimate any personality or any type of person, because you have this created idea of like who would be you know, this character, and it's like, well, you're thinking about yourself.
My friends in the 501st are always trying to get me to dress up like Lando Calrissian, and I tell them, look, that's too obvious, you know. So we had this discussion and said, you know who I want to be Han Solo, you know.
Do it, yeah. It's a girl who beat out a lot of her boy cousins and a lot of her boyfriends to be girl Han. I will say, it is worth playing.
Paul, as Corey mentioned, oh sorry, Samantha, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, going on back exactly that point about you being Han Solo, Myrna. For me, obviously, this is a kind of a different issue because I'm, you know, under a helmet. So a lot of the what I kind of feel like I represent are behind the scenes sort of representation. So, you know, the first female stormtrooper, and being a woman of color as well. So there's the gender diversity as well. So when the first show that I did, Convention, a dad, he brought his daughter to meet me, and she was very young. She was about 5 or 6, and she was playing Star Wars with her older brother and his friends, and they were giving out characters, and her brother said, I'm Han Solo, and his friend said, I'm Luke Skywalker. And then this little girl said, I'm a stormtrooper. And her brother's friend said, you can't be a stormtrooper, you're a girl. And she said, yes, I can, because Samantha Alleyne's a stormtrooper and she's a girl.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I cried a lot. And it gives me goosebumps just telling that story. She didn't just know my name off, by the way, that was weird. She actually watched the Blu-ray DVD with her dad for The Force Awakens, where they interviewed me and my name, and he explains the whole situation to her, and she remembered me. And I don't know if there's a better illustration of why representation is so important than that. This little girl was told by her brother and his friend, through no fault of their own. They watched Star Wars and they hear the stormtroopers' voices at that time, and they heard men's voices and they assumed they were all men. And what you do with representation is you lift the lid off of that, the limitation. You take the lid off, you take the ceiling away, and you say, yes, you can do that. You can be a stormtrooper. If you're a girl, you can be anything you want to be. And Dino, I've met Dino and his beautiful daughter, and I've had conversations with little girls, and they've said, I want to be this, I want to be, and it's about taking away those ceilings and saying, yes, you may be of color and you may be a girl, but it doesn't matter. And I think this is testament to my mum, but I've never ever felt like there's anything I couldn't do. And I know at times that's like, really? I just feel that in me, and I think, yeah, I know, right?
No, my father used to tell me my father used to tell me, he said, Corey, there's no such thing as you can't. And I thought he was full of crap, I was like, what are you talking about?
But I genuinely believe if you want to do something, obviously there's like monetary and other things that can stop you. But most of the time, if you really dream something, you can achieve it. I never dreamt I would be sitting where I'm sitting now, but I am. And I just think it is so important. I think going back to human basic psychology, we look for people like ourselves in every situation. You go to a party, you look for people like you without even realizing you want to see people like you. You want to feel like you belong. And that's why it's so important to have people that are like us on screen, and in the 501st, in the cosplay community, everywhere, just so that you feel like you can identify with people that you're around, and it's so important to do that.
On that, I want to turn the spotlight on Paul real quick, and maybe you can share a little bit of the work you did on Kim's Convenience, and also like how you transitioned to The Mandalorian. And in my mind, like seeing both shows and loving both shows, seeing how people of color, Asian people can have like these like shows devoted to their culture and this honest look at humor with that sort of like background. And it's like we're no longer just the character on the side, but rather it is the focus. And then seeing on The Mandalorian, me feeling like, oh, I can show this to my daughter and show her that, no, there are Asians in the rebellion. And this is the world that, even though the culture might not be the same, we are seen in these shows. And I want to just get your take on that journey you took.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, when I started off my journey as an actor, I found a lot of doors that were closed to me simply because of the way I looked. And the narrative wasn't framed for an Asian character. Even if I spoke unaccented English, on a character breakdown sheets, I wasn't allowed to audition for certain parts just because, in Canada, it was, the breakdown, if it says open to all ethnicities, they're looking for non-white. But if it doesn't have that describer beside it, it's basically the default is a white, a Caucasian actor on it. That's the way it was before. And so a lot of doors were closed to me because they didn't consider me relatable for audiences, and that's why they wouldn't cast that way. And so that became a little bit frustrating, but I knew, in my mind, like all my friends they were going off, auditioning for like guest spots or lead roles or supporting stuff. And because there was nothing written specifically for Asian characters, there wasn't a lot for me to audition for. Lots of doctors, lots of lawyers, lots of engineers. So my parents would have been very happy. And so with Kim's getting made, I mean, it started off as a play, first of all. And this play struck a chord because of the fact that it was just so relatable, even though it was specifically about a Korean family. And that translated onto the television screens. And basically, it really opened up a lot of doors because this was the first of its kind, this kind of show in Canada, where it was a situational comedy with an all Asian lead cast. And it was specifically about a Korean Canadian family that was running a convenience store or corner store in Toronto, in a bit of a rough neighborhood in Toronto. And what it did show is it showed the dynamics of family were similar. It doesn't matter where you came from, what culture you were from, and people related to that. And it was done in such a respectful manner, in an authentic manner. And it was done without caricature. It was done without pandering. It wasn't this after school special where everything was, great. This was a real family with real problems, but who loved each other. And I think that resonated. And never in a million years did I ever think I was going to be a lead in a television series, let alone being number one on a call sheet. So for me, this was like a huge opportunity to sort of lead by example and to really enjoy and be grateful for this opportunity to do that. And I knew I wasn't going to let my own sort of laziness or anything get in the way because I didn't know if I was ever going to get this opportunity again. So there was a drive to be, and this is always it for BIPOC artists. You always have to work 5 times harder than everybody else. You always have to, because you get such few chances or opportunities to succeed, and you have even less opportunities to fail is another big thing. Yeah. You always have to, you got to hit home runs all the time. And it sucks and it isn't fair, but that's the way it was. It's getting better now, but that's the way it was. And I was determined not to let any factor that I can control be a detriment to what was happening with the show. And so I worked my ass off for it. And luckily enough, the show really exploded. It was great in Canada, #1 sort of rated comedy in Canada. But it wasn't until we hit Netflix, international US Netflix, that it really started to explode and really sort of become as popular as it is. And that's what led to The Mandalorian, because it turns out that Deborah Chow is an old friend of mine from way back in the day. We were both working at this little theater company that was going bankrupt in Toronto. That's how we met. And I didn't see her for like 25 years till she jumped in front of me at an event in LA and said, "Hey, do you remember me?" I was like, "Yes." And I found out she was working on The Mandalorian. And then she told me, she drops another bombshell saying that Dave Filoni knows Kim's Convenience and is a fan of the show and wants to write something for you, right?
Wow.
Like, come on.
That's awesome.
My leg, right? So, and that was a thing. That was that sort of it's like this sequence of events had to start 25 years before.
Yeah.
For everything to sort of get to that point where Deb goes, "Oh, I know him," and get to talk to Dave and introduce us and get the ball rolling on all that. And it's just like, if Dave as well and Jon Favreau and the Star Wars universe weren't more, if they weren't open to diversity and representation, they never would have reached out either. But they saw that it was important. They saw the good it could do. And for me, that's all the best parts of Star Wars, really, is reaching out to the fans. It's a celebration of every, you look at the diversity of the fan base alone, right? It just makes sense too, to be inclusive on the screens. And so that was, for me, I felt like Cinderella, at the ball, because I already got this one thing, and then I get to do and live out a lifelong dream to be in Star Wars. I got to tell you, as an Asian performer, there weren't very many up until Rogue One, and then you saw Chiwetel and Baze Malbus and stuff. There weren't that many prime examples, and so and me being in Canada, you kind of go, well, I'd love to be in Star Wars, but I don't know what my opportunities will be like. And then to have that happen is, I'm grateful every day. I still can't believe it, right?
I was so excited when they put Donnie Yen in there. He was like one of my favorite martial artists, man. I was like, oh wow. It's like he's like to me, he's like the modern day version of Bruce Lee. I mean, he's just such a tremendous martial artist, but a fabulous actor too. And I was like, that is so cool that they're putting him in there.
Yeah.
And you know, in that film specifically, Corey, that Diego Luna and him, they both were able to keep their accents, which is amazing.
Right.
Which is like beautiful to me, because that bigger galaxy is diverse, right? No one, not everyone can sound American with a Californian English, right?
When the first time I saw when I saw Enter the Dragon, which was the first Bruce Lee movie that you actually heard Bruce Lee's voice. You know, up until that point, there was some Caucasian guy with a deep, you know, it didn't match, you know.
And Myrna, I want to take a question to you real quick. Like, as someone who's done a bunch of voice work, you've done stuff like that was more, you know, what's the animation show again? I'm forgetting the name, but my daughter used to love it.
Alleyne of
Avalor, which was more like
Latin,
Latin American in its texture. And then you go to Resistance, which is like, you know, you are indeed someone from space. Like, how do you determine what voice do you bring to the character, given that, you know, there's some that are more ethnically appropriate? I guess what I'm asking is, when is it representation, and when is it space appropriation? Like, how do you dance that line, right?
Right. Yeah, I have very serious conversations with like friends and family about this, because it is a really important aspect that I don't think voice actors or actors were really thinking about for a long time. Case in point, Bruce Lee was dubbed by an American to sound like me, I guess. But like, I have this is my natural voice's affectation, because I grew up in the California school systems, and I was told that, like, at a very young age, I was incredibly bilingual, and I was told by school officials to not speak Spanish at home anymore because it was interrupting the way I was learning English, which was untrue. It just made me sound different. And I think that, like, the most important part of walking into my Resistance audition was when I asked, and this remains kind of like a mean thing that I do now. I'm not that nice. But I asked Justin Ringe, who was executive producing Resistance from the get-go, I asked him, like, okay, so you were looking specifically for Latinx, Latina voices. Do you want her to have a specific voice, or do you want me to just talk like this? And he said, yeah, let's do like a little Latina accent, see what that sounds like. And I waited, and he was like, whenever you're ready. And I kept waiting, and I was like, okay, but I can't start until you tell me what kind of Latina, because it's not just Mexican American, it's not Mexican from DC, it's not, you know, like, there's also Guatemalan, there's Cuban, there's Dominican, who do you want? And then, like, we need to then discuss if that's appropriate for me to do, because I could, you know, like, there are blurry lines as to, like, what voice, what affectation, what dialect can you really represent without offending someone? And you know, we have really deep conversations about that in the booth, as well as just as an actor, because I do understand that there were plenty of white guys that lost jobs because they couldn't voice teenage Mexican girls anymore, I guess. But what truth are you bringing to that story? And
wow.
And to me, like, yes, I can speak about impoverished kids who grew up, you know, in Tijuana, or you know, I can speak for or with the affectation and the confidence of knowing what it feels like to live in an inner city, and where my voice changes from that. and based off of what city are we talking? Gotham, or are we talking New York? Like, one I get to play with, the other one has this historical background around it already. So I don't think a lot of people were really thinking about all of the different ways a regional and a local culture affects the way we speak. Whereas I was lucky and had been thinking about this for so long while trying to deal with the same pressures in Hollywood of like, there are so few opportunities to fail, and I failed at all of them. Until I didn't. Because I asked Justin Ringe, which was a risk. He could have been like, get out, which a lot of directors and a lot of producers did say, oh, I don't think you're taking this seriously enough, get out. And I was like, no, I'm actually taking it more seriously than you. It's just you weren't thinking about the world the way I see it. Yeah. And that's really the point, is that none of us, when we create stories, we're thinking about the way that we saw this specific experience. But when you open it up for a collaborative medium like film, like television, like animation, like plays, like YouTube, you're going to then get people with different perspectives, and isn't that the point of why we do this? And
I just want to say that I think a lot of the ignorance comes from the fact that we don't really know people, like we have to become friends with other kinds of people to really understand what their culture is about and really get a grip on what it's really like. In high school, my girlfriend was Mexican, but I could not drop her off at her house because her parents did not like the idea that she would be going out with a Black man. So I would have to drop her off at the corner and she would walk home. And when I picked her up, I would have to pick her up at some other location other than the house she lived at. So there was all this sort of tension going on. But people, and it really just stemmed from the fact that they didn't even have any Black friends. They didn't even know what Black people were about or anything. I mean, it's just, I think a lot of people just need to branch out, get to know some people, learn something about other people.
Yeah, which is, I think, the power of cinema and TV, right? In places where branching out and finding friends of different diversity is harder. I at least know that I can turn on Disney Plus and catch an episode of Star Wars and see all of you and show that to my daughter. And wherever it's hard to get that, and there are other places where diversity is harder to get to, that sort of like bridges the gap a little bit. It won't get you there, but it will start you there. The next question I want to ask, and I'll start with Samantha on this one maybe, is what would be a dream project for you? And it doesn't necessarily have to be Star Wars, but what's missing in the world that you think Samantha and all of you can bring? Like, what's a dream project?
Gosh, that's a big question. I think there's first of all, I would love to take the Stormtrooper helmet off.
Yes.
I got close in 9, the helmet came off. I did film a scene. I auditioned for JJ and I did record a scene and I had lines, so I didn't speak. Unfortunately, the storyline was changed, so that got cut. But we're getting closer. So I would like to, have a fully fledged acting role. I am a trained actress and that's what I want to do, and I'm a good actress. But in terms of telling stories, I think there's so much going on in my mind. I've just been watching the BAFTAs here in the UK. We have a show, Britain's Got Talent. I think you have America's Got Talent. And just after the George Floyd incident, one of the presenters who actually won the show a few years back, him and his dance troupe did a dance piece based on Black Lives Matter. And the Ofcom, the TV regulators, got a record number of complaints from people who said that it was inappropriate for them to do that, which was awful. They got death threats and stuff. They just won a BAFTA tonight for doing that dance.
Yes.
Literally right before I came onto this panel, I was in tears and I was like, don't cry, you're going on live. It's changing the narrative, and yeah, the number of complaints was a record number of complaints, but they have just won a BAFTA for that.
Yes.
And it's about showing people that what they think is wrong, and that there is more good than bad, and it's just slowly chipping away. And I think there was also awards for Small Axe, which told the story of the racial tensions in Britain, the Steve McQueen project. And so I think all of these stories just need to be told. I got involved with the 501st for Black History Month in the US, and I got a lot of trolls comments about that. And I stand by what I do and what I say. It's about education, and I think the only way, just like Corey says, about talking to people and meeting people. Corey, when I was young, one of my first boyfriends, he broke up with me, and I asked him why, and he said it's because you're not white and my parents don't like it. And we're not talking about 1950s here. This is not that long ago. And so it is about breaking down all of this prejudice and stigma and education and stories. And so in answer to your question, I would love very much to just to have anything that speaks of these issues, to really get my teeth into a part like that, especially someone like me who, as I said, racially ambiguous, maybe people would think, and my upbringing and what it means to be not necessarily Black. I had at school, there was the Black girls who didn't want me, and then there was the white girls who didn't want me, and it was like, well, where do I fit in? It was hard. And so I would love to get my teeth into a project that speaks on this, that breaks down the narratives, and that tells the stories that need to be told, so that we can continue the great work I think we all agree that Star Wars has done and is doing. I think we're all in agreement here that they have, from the day one. Princess Leia, huge feminist icon in 1977. Hello? So Star Wars always has done great work and is still continuing to do so. And we're all of us sitting here now are testament of that. And so I would like to carry on outside of Star Wars and tell those sorts of stories that need to be told.
Thank you. Where anybody else wanna? That's a mic drop right there.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Oh my heart.
Good night.
Yeah. She what she's doing.
We're coming up to.
I have to just say, Myrna, your stories about what you said to the producer about, and I know it seems like you're being clever and making a point or whatever, but if it isn't for people like you, nothing will change. And so I just applaud your bravery and tenacity to keep doing that, even when they told you to get out. So well done, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I knew this panel would go very quickly because of all the amazing things you guys are going to say. And sure enough,
need another hour.
Yes, we are at the end of the hour, and I feel like we're just getting started, and which is a true testament to what it is.
I'm gonna have to call all you guys after this now.
Wait, can we do dinner? We can do dinner, right?
Please, I would love that. This means so much to me that you guys were part of this. Again, I'm the Legion Diversity Officer, and this is the kind of conversations I want us to grow into. I think that we didn't need to get into it, but I'm always trying to find ways for the 501st to recognize more inclusion. And, this is something, as any other organization is, we're growing into. And having all of you, our heroes, speak to this right now means so much to me and to everybody else. I want to use the last few minutes for you guys to just share any projects that you're working on right now that I could help broadcast through this feed. I'm
actually really quite proud of Madagascar A Little Wild on it's on Amazon Prime, right? Is that what it's on? I've been doing some work with them at DreamWorks, and I'm actually not sure if I'm allowed to say what characters I'm playing there, but it's a really great children's show. If you want to learn American Sign Language, you want to learn Spanish, or just a little bit about the Bronx Zoo, that's a super heartwarming way to do it.
Definitely check it out.
I'll go. Sorry. Kim's Convenience just dropped on US Netflix June 2nd and Netflix International. It is our final season, unfortunately, but there's still a lot of joy in it. I think it was one of our strongest seasons. We had 5 fantastic years in the sun, so I will never, ever complain about that. And all the doors it opened and the opportunities it gave me, like being on a Star Wars show. So I will always love Kim's Convenience and treasure my time on there forever. That being said as well, I've got a YouTube channel. Check it out, Bitter Asian Dude Inc. It's a geeky show where I do unboxings, I do Star Wars reviews and toy reviews and comparisons and whatnot. Check it out. It's there to just celebrate nerd and geek culture. So
definitely check it out. Corey and Sam. Oh.
I have a bunch of exciting stuff that I can't tell you about. Sorry.
Awesome.
But I'm not allowed to say anything.
It's gonna be huge.
Yeah, it may or may not be in a galaxy far, far away. But either way, there's a bunch of stuff. I can't talk about any of it. But yeah, if you guys follow me on social media, I will announce as and when I can, and hopefully getting out to conventions soon so I can meet everyone, and getting over to the States as well. So hopefully meet you guys.
Yeah.
Mine is a music project, which most people don't know. I've been a musician all my life, as well as a fitness trainer. But I never really tried to get into acting. I was always a musician. Music was, around me all my life. So it's called the 3D Nucleus Project, which is, I want to show you this logo, which is really kind of cool. It's a cartoon caricature of me wearing Lando's skiff guard outfit, and the headphones are made out of the helmet that Lando wore. And I actually doubled my father in that scene. So it's called the 3D Nucleus Project. You go to 3D, like my name, nucleus.com. And there's links to all of we're on Instagram, YouTube, everything. We just put out an EP. We just released an EP, which is on iTunes and also on Spotify. And it's modern funk. That's what we do. So we're bringing funk into the future. Funk is a genre that's sort of been floating around, and it was lost for a while, and now it's back. And we're just trying to do something new and exciting with that genre of music.
Awesome. We'll definitely check it out. I have no way of posting links right now, but what I'll promise to do is when we repost this same interview on YouTube, once it's chopped into a certain segment, I'll make sure all your links are there and I'll help broadcast those. Thank you again, everyone. And then to the audience out there, if you enjoyed this conversation at all, or any of the conversations you saw through these last 3 days, please donate to FIRST. It means a lot to us. None of these people in front or behind the camera are paid. This is all volunteer work for the love of charity for STEM. So please donate to FIRST. And thank you very much on that.
Thank you, Dino.
Take care.
Thank you. It was nice meeting you all. Stay